was on the highway patrol. He put, I think, 30 years on the highway patrol. I can remember when I was a child, I was, I guess maybe I was maybe 5 years old, I'm thinking. My dad wouldn't get a dinner hour. He was, I think, probably the only trooper that was working in this very rural county. And so he would come in for dinner, and then he would have my brother and I go sit in his car at nighttime and listen for his call number. We knew what his call number was. And he said, if that number is said, you come in the house and get me so I can go back out and answer my radio. And so being 5 years old, I'd go out there in that car and it was dark. And all I could think of were all the booger men that were out there running around. They were going to come and get me. And I was scared to death every night that I had to go get in that car. Well, I would go in one night, and then the next night, my brother, who would have been like 7, he would go out and he would listen on the radio. And I was always so happy when my brother was out there with the booger men and I wasn't. I look back at that and I think, it would have been so much smarter if my brother and I would have teamed up and we went out there together and sat in Dad's car and listened for his call number. If we would have done that, we could have talked and we could have been reassured that no booger men were going to get us if both of us were there together. So I look back at that experience. I think about how much I enjoy spending time with my brother now and the conversations that we have whenever we are able to work together. What a great time it is. And I wonder, why in the world couldn't I understand that back when I was 5 and 6 years old? There's just something about growing older that gives us maybe a different perspective in life. Well, my name is Richard Coleman, and I'm the pastor at Shepherd Church of the Nazarene in Lexington, South Carolina, and it's great to spend just a few moments with you today. Well, Jacob had several sons, and it's actually the 11th son that he had. He had this one by his wife Rachel, and Rachel was very special to Jacob, and this was her first child, and so because of that, not only was Joseph the youngest, but because he was Rachel's son, Jacob just gave him special attention. The Bible tells us that he favored Joseph more than he did any of his other sons. Even gave him, you probably heard the story about Joseph in the coat of many colors, gave him a beautiful outfit to wear that none of the other brothers have, and just treated him special. Well, Joseph, he would see his older brothers doing things that they ought not do. Joseph would go tell his dad about it. And then his dad would get down on them, and I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us, but he probably said, Joseph told me that you, and so anyway, his brothers, they didn't like Joseph. I mean, he was a snitch. He was always telling on them. He got treated special. He probably didn't get disciplined like them. He was that younger child, and they didn't even want to look at him. They certainly didn't want to talk to him. One day, Jacob sent Joseph out to check on his brothers, and they were a distance away, and so he went out to check on them. The brothers saw him coming, and they came up with this plan. They said, let's just kill him. Another brother said, we don't want his blood on our hands. Let's don't kill him. Let's sell him into slavery next time a group of slave traders come by. And anyway, that's what they did. Well, I realize there's 3 ways that I can really look at this story if I wanted to. I could look at it from Joseph's perspective. I could look at it from the brothers' perspective, or I could look at it from just the outside looking in. And so I'd like to take just a few moments this morning and do those 3 things if I can. So I think about Joseph. If I were in Joseph's shoes, I'd have to realize that first off, Joseph was very naive. Joseph was young. Joseph apparently was spoiled rotten, and Joseph had really no experience in life. And so I think back about, when I was 5 and 6 years old, all the things that I could have done better. And I know Joseph was 17, so you're saying that's totally different, but I look back when I was 17 and I'm thinking, oh boy, if I would have just made some better decisions at 17 years old. But one thing I realized looking at it from Joseph's perspective is that when I look back with regrets, and even if I committed sins back in the earlier part of my life, that God loves me enough that He is willing to forgive me of those sins. And all I have to do is come to Him and ask Him for forgiveness. And God does that. He wipes our slate clean. Joseph made many mistakes and did some foolish things that led to him being sold into slavery. But no matter what it was, that God can still look beyond that and see who we are deep down and also who we can become. And then I think about the brothers. If I were one of the brothers, I would be looking at Joseph and say, well, how many times has he ratted me out? How many times has he gone to Dad and said things about me and got me in trouble, and he's just a pain in my side. I can see where the brothers are coming from on that. He was a spy. He was Dad's favorite. He didn't get punished like the rest of it. It's just not fair. He hasn't had the same upbringing that the rest of us did. But when I think about from the brother's perspective, I think how important it is that when we look at others and we're giving that same type of analogy, we have to ask ourselves, what if I were in that person's place? What if I would have been Joseph and that's the way that I was brought up and that's the only thing that I ever knew? Would I be doing things the same way? And how easy it is for us to look at the Josephs in our life, the ones that are just a real pain and we don't want to talk to them, we don't want anything to do with them. And sometimes I think we need to step back and just say, well, how did they get the way they are? Did their parents maybe abuse them? Did they have all kind of things happen in their life that I just have no idea about? And I think sometimes when we look back and to see why people have the personalities or why they act the way they do, if we look back into their history, we might say, I can see why maybe they are the way they are, and allow us to have a little bit more empathy for where they're coming from. And then I think about the third way, and that's from the outside looking in. And so just looking at the story of these two, in other words, I know somebody, let's say, that attends my church, or somebody that's a neighbor of mine, or maybe even something that I heard on the news. And so I hear all about this scenario that's going on, and I start having all of these opinions. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that sorry, no good younger brother, I mean, he deserved everything he got. Or I could say, those sorry, no good brothers, they're just jealous, and they had no right to do all the things that they. And it's easy for me to be able to make those statements because really I don't have all the facts and I don't know everything that's going on. And so how important it is for us, whenever we're looking at something that we really don't have all the facts of, that we could withhold. Maybe I would say the word judgment might be a bad word to use, but we could withhold our judgment and say, I really don't know this entire scenario, or maybe I've only heard one side of it. And until we hear it all, then we need to maybe hold back on our opinion. I think about what Jesus said. Jesus was talking about looking at other people and their lives, and Jesus said, I did not come to judge. He said, my Father will do that. So Jesus was letting us know we will be judged. But Jesus was saying, that's not my purpose for coming to earth. He said, I came to save. He said, but my Father will be a judge. And so if Jesus on earth was not judging others, then I believe, I'm pretty confident that we ought not either. And then Jesus said at another time, and this, if you really think about what Jesus said here, would really make us think. He said, you will be judged by the same measure that you judge others. So with that being the case, I don't want to judge anybody. You know, I don't want to be critical and say bad things about people, and God uses that same standard to judge me. We're supposed to take people, love people, even ones that disappoint us, ones that persecute us. We're supposed to say, you know, it's okay. I don't have to be a judge of that person. That's totally left up to God. Well, who is it in your life that's maybe been aggravating you? Who is it in your life that maybe you've been looking at and you're saying, you know, they ought to be thrown out with the dishwater? Who is it in your life that you're making these types of calls about it? You know, I think maybe what we ought to do is just say, I'm going to start praying for that person. I'm going to ask God to bless that person. And whenever we do that, I believe God opens up something within us to draw us closer to Him. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you. May you truly be able to do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Thanks for taking the time and viewing today.